Hi, I'm Stacy Mandeville with consumer protection attorney Daniel Schlanger. We're going to be talking a little bit about negotiating with creditors. How you doing, Daniel?
Great. How are you, Stacy?
Great. What are the keys to successfully negotiating with creditors?
Stacy, I think there are four basic components to successful negotiation with creditors. One is knowing your defenses. Another is knowing your potential claims against the debt collector or creditor. The third is knowing what you can afford to pay. And the fourth is making sure you deal with someone who has authority to negotiate.
You mentioned defenses. What are some of the legal defenses that can benefit a consumer?
Many times consumers overpay when they're negotiating with creditors because they don't properly leverage their defenses. There can be many defenses in a collection action, but three that we see often are statute of limitations, meaning that the collector or creditor may have waited too long to bring any lawsuit. If that is the case, then obviously they have really little or no leverage to demand payment. Another is lack of standing, meaning that the entity that's currently trying to collect from the consumer can't necessarily prove that they own the debt. And that's because many of these debts pass through multiple entities, so that a debt may be on its third or fourth purported owner by the time that the consumer is negotiating. Many times that third or fourth owner does not have a paper trail showing that they have title to this account. The third is lack of personal jurisdiction. This comes up, unfortunately, very often in New York collection actions. And what this refers to is the failure of the debt collector to properly commence the lawsuit that they've brought against the consumer. Very often they will bring the lawsuit, but then serve the papers at an old address that's out of date, where the consumer no longer lives, at an incorrect address, and sometimes service will just be entirely falsified. In many cases, when you bring these defenses up forcefully with a collector, they become much more flexible in terms of negotiating, and in some instances, the defenses are strong enough that they're willing to walk away entirely.
Now, how about the claims that a consumer could assert against a collector?
Similar to what happens when consumers don't properly advance their defenses in negotiations, many consumers overpay in negotiations because they don't identify and properly leverage their potential claims against the debt collector. And in particular, I'm referring here to claims they may have under a federal consumer protection statute called the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, which generally bars deceptive and unfair conduct by debt collectors. There's a wide range of things that collectors do to violate this act. And if we are able to identify a viable FDCPA claim, very often the entire dynamic of a negotiation will change.
You mentioned the importance of clients knowing their budget. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. The point here is a simple one, but important. It's critical that consumers don't enter into settlement agreements with debt collectors that they can't afford. Many times, breaching a settlement agreement will leave you significantly worse off than if you had never entered any agreement at all. It's often better for consumers to pay a lump sum in settlement than to make payments over time. And the reason is that with payments over time, it's possible for unforeseen situations to come up and for people to miss those payments. And if they miss those payments, as I mentioned, they really might end up worse off than if they had never entered into the agreement at all.
Dan, I don't understand. Why would a debt collector ever allow somebody without authority to negotiate with a consumer?
Stacy, what you need to understand about many of these debt collectors is that they're large operations. They may have dozens or even hundreds of people on the collection floor calling consumers at any given time. The floor collectors are very often not particularly experienced or qualified, and as a result are given very narrow parameters within which to work. If a consumer can't get further up the food chain and talk with someone who has actual authority to significantly compromise the amount that the collector is willing to accept, many times it's hard to make any progress on a good negotiation or a good settlement.
How can hiring an attorney assist consumers in settling their debts?
Hiring an attorney can help in a number of ways. First of all, an experienced consumer protection attorney will be able to identify significant defenses and significant potential claims that the consumer may have. And that can be key to gaining traction in a negotiation. In addition, it's often easier for an attorney to reach someone with real bargaining authority and real discretion. And as a result, negotiations can both be quicker and be more effective.
Thank you so much, Dan. I'm sure you helped a lot of people today with that information.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you.